Okay, here we go again. Technology, is it going to win or am I going to win? Either way, I think we're live and that's a good thing. And I'm going to try to see what on earth is going on here. Okay, there we go. All right, so it's been about a month since I have been with you all. Do we have. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Um, been about a month since I've been with you all, and have had vacation time going on, and we've had um, lectures going on, and it's just been real interesting kind of thing, you know. So I'm still waiting to see about Facebook. Facebook is not real happy at this point, so I don't know. This is getting crazy actually. So let me just do a quick check here and see if I'm actually on. So I have to go here, right? Hmm. Yeah, looks like I just can't see anybody. Huh, weird. Okay. Well, we'll just do our thing here and see what happens. So no, well, I see comments. Okay, so Facebook is fine, Ariel says. It's black on my screen, so maybe it'll come up. We'll see what happens. And YouTube's looking good. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about here tonight. I got lots and lots of things that I want to share with you and I want to talk about. So the Spirit and Life lectures, that was a great time. So that was 2-3 weeks ago, right? And you can go to and you can find the Spirit and Life lectures on the YouTube channel JCBN, and I don't remember exactly that. Maybe if we can get Brother Michael Trusty to give us a link for that, or somebody give us a link for that, we'll post that and get that there. But there's what 7 or 8 different speakers, and every topic was just fantastic, and the truth was being taught, and you really need to check that out. So we'll try to get the link from that and get that to you. And I think there's a couple of them on my Facebook page too. So I'll try to put those also on YouTube. Now, after that, we had just a couple weeks off for vacation. And I'll tell you what, I just um, there's some things I want to say about this vacation stuff. Okay, so when I go on vacation, it's always good to get back home and be back with our brethren who worship in spirit and in truth. And here's the reason I say that. Whenever I go out of town, and I try to go to other congregations. And I even go to congregations in the Indianapolis area. And oh, excuse me, my allergies are acting up like crazy. So if I sneeze, just give me a second and I'll get back. But either way, so I can even go to a congregation here in Indianapolis, and they essentially have me make me leave. You know, they'll tell me to get out. Some of them have literally grabbed me by the arm and escorted me out. So that's not a good thing. But either way, when I go out of town and I talk to people, it's very interesting. And I can tell you this, the preachers that I come across and talk to at these local churches of Christ, they have no answer for the questions that I ask. And I remember, I think it's been a couple years ago, we went to congregation and they were studying the book of Acts, and in they were in the third chapter, and I'm like, yes. um, I wanted to ask questions about that, so I asked questions, and the preacher just simply told me he was not going to answer them. So what does that say? What it says is that how do I put this? But there are people that simply do not want. Hi, Brent. Brent's on YouTube, by the way. So that's a good thing. YouTube probably is the better video and audio than Facebook. Facebook has kind of dropped the ball a little bit on this recently, although I'm thankful for both of them. So I'll try to watch the comments on both. I'll do my best. But anyway, they are not worshiping God in spirit and in truth. And that bothers me. I know that there are brethren out there who are baptized into Christ. But that's kind of almost it. I mean, they get the concept that you need to be baptized, you need to submit, you need to give your life to Christ, you need to have faith, repent and be baptized. That's what Peter told them on the day of Pentecost, so I can preach it too, right? So they get that, but they refuse to see some very simple truths. And then they come up with, how do I put this? They come up with these wild explanations for some plain and clear passages. Like I was Brent Bishop. As a matter of fact, I need to get a link for this. I put it on my story, I think, but I don't know if I still have a link on there. But so Brent Bishop is debating Norm Fields. Now I don't have it on there apparently, but so Brent Bishop is debating Norm Fields, and I think they've both done their first speech. Well, Brent comes out hard hitting, and he makes the points, and he just, I mean, it's just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So Norm comes along and does his show, and I mean, Brent was like 16 or 18 minutes or something like that in his first affirmative, and he packed 2,000 years worth of truth into 16 or 18 minutes. Just did a fantastic job. So Norm comes along, and his biggest argument, I like how Roy Runyon put this. His best argument was, "Nuh-uh, that's not what he meant. That's not what he said." So he spends nearly 2 hours in his program. Brent took 20 minutes. Norm takes 2 hours. Something wrong there. But apparently Norm doesn't get it. But so Norm pretty much just says, no, that's not what it means, and never offers any real explanations. Now, I mean, he did try some, so I'll give him not an A for effort, but I'll give him a check mark for putting in some effort there. But he says they did see him coming. There were some of them standing there alive who did see the church begin. That is not what the passage says. That's totally taking Matthew 16, 27 and 28 completely out of context. I mean, it simply makes no sense at all. They were all alive except for one. The language doesn't support what Norm said. So my point about it is this, that so many people might be able to see a part of the truth, and they see a part of the truth because that's how amen, Bobby, he failed. Simple. That's right. Norm he just dropped the ball. He's totally failed. But the reason people can't see the truth is because they don't want to see the truth. Seeing the truth means that you have to reject everybody else. And the problem arises that everybody else is 99.7% of everybody else. Or I don't know, it may not be that much, but you get the point. And they are against you. I cannot tell you the amount of people who I've come across in Christianity. People who claim to be Christians, people who are Christians, people who claim it and aren't, and so forth. But it doesn't matter. It all works out to be the same. And they just totally reject the truth. And the reason they do this is because the truth that they were taught is what they're comfortable with. This was no different than people in the first century. For 1,500 years, there was prophecy after prophecy after prophecy, really more than that. But for 1,500 years, from Moses to the time of Christ, 1,500 years. Prophecies about what is going to take place when Messiah comes. And then all of a sudden, miracles start taking place again. Dead people are being resurrected. And then Jesus himself is resurrected, defeating Hades casting it into the lake of fire and destroying it and opening heaven. And these people, listen to this, they still rejected the truth right in front of them. Let's go back to the time when Jesus was alive. And Jesus was heralded by so many. Oh, he's great and he's wonderful. And they loved him, and they threw uh, uh, olive branch leaves, whatever, down, and they said, you know, whatever. And I just thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then just a few days later, they were saying, crucify him, crucify him. We have no king but Caesar. Why would they do that? Because the majority wanted to go with that narrative. And few and far between were the people who accepted the truth. Now, that's the way it was in the first century. I have a reason for saying this, by the way. That's the way it was in the first century. That's the way it is today. It's a very small number of people who actually accept the truth. You think I'm wrong about that? We say, well, 86% of people in America are Christians. No, they're not. 86% of people in America might claim to be Christians, but they're not. How many people are trying to enter through the gate, through the wide gate, and hoping that it gets them eventually to the narrow gate? Those people cannot. Okay, here's the way this works, and it does not help us to beat around the bush. By the way, I just saw your comment there, David Stambursky. Excellent to see you here tonight. It does no good to beat around the bush. And Dusty Rose and Bobby Allison, and I think I saw Tim Ogles and Ariel Watson. Good last name you got there. And so forth. So it does no good to beat around the bush and tell people that they're okay when they're not. The scriptures plainly teach, and if we had time, this is not my topic tonight, but if we had time, we could go through the prophecies that, and the type and the antitype and the shadows of baptism, water baptism, in the Old Testament, and show how it was a fulfillment in the New Testament. Okay? But yet people reject that. They say, well, then that's a work. Okay, you're going to tell me that belief is not a work? Not something that you have to do? So anyway, I guess we won't go there so much because I want to get back to this point. So these people have rejected the truth, and they come up with these arguments, like Bobby's making a point here now. Norm wouldn't answer. He wouldn't answer these things. I'm not sure if I heard him on Luke 21. I haven't listened to all of this. Oh wow, he actually said that we go to Luke 21, 20 to 33. Because it was just our preference. Well, wait a minute. Is that a Bible-inspired Bible verse? I think it is. So I think I prefer all of the inspired ones. These guys, by the way, you're going to see this through Norm's debate with Brent. You're going to see how they lean very heavily on the patristics, uninspired men, for a lot of their answers, which we're going to talk about here in just a second too. So I'm leading up to all of this. Did these people see Jesus? These patristics? Well, we don't really have any really early patristics, so to speak. And there's a time period after 70 for about 30 or 40 years where it's almost silent. There's not a lot being written by people, whether it's about the destruction of Jerusalem or whatever. So there's just not a lot of writing going on. And people like Ed Stevens and others say, well, that's the reason that happened is because the rapture happened. First off, there's no rapture. You cannot find a rapture anywhere in the Bible. It's simply not there. And you say, well, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 teaches a rapture. No, it doesn't. Let me show you this. So go over here to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Maybe I should bring this up. Yeah, I'm going to bear with me for a moment, and I'll bring this up. Let's do NASB, because that's what I use. OAX. Not that it's the end-all, beat-all to translations, but it is what it is. Okay, so I can enlarge this and we can look. We can look if I can figure out how to do this. Cam 1, large and desktop. Cam 1. Okay, there we go. I know why Facebook doesn't look good on mine. Because I took a camera with me and never hooked it back up. Anyway, so let's just get through this. All right. So here we go. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, here's what it says starting at verse 13. I'm going to try to make that as big as I can so that it'll be easy enough to read. There we go. Okay, he says, but, is that a transition word or is it a conjunction? I'll tell you right now, it's a conjunction. So, same conjunction. You know, conjunction, junction, how's that function? I don't know what I'm doing here, making all these lines. But it hooks up all of these things. So he says, but we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about those who are asleep, so that you will not grieve, as indeed the rest of mankind do, who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose from the dead, so also God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep through Jesus. For we say this to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are... Now listen to this. This we say. So what's the topic here in verses 13 and 14? Okay, so what's this topic? The topic is, we don't want you to be uninformed about those who have died, those who are asleep. Physically dead people, spiritually alive. They've died. They're the ones awaiting the coming of the Lord in the spiritual side of things. Okay, they are spirits. They're not physical bodies. So he says, we don't want you to be ignorant or uninformed about those who are in that condition, so that you will not grieve as indeed the rest do. This of mankind, probably not great. But grieve about the rest as the rest do, who have no hope. Okay, what was the hope? Their hope was the resurrection of the dead. That was the hope. The brethren at Thessalonica had a hope for the resurrection of the dead ones. That's what 1 Corinthians 15 teaches. It's multiples. It's a plural. The eknekron, the dead ones. These were the people who were waiting in Hades. It's a pretty simple thing, okay? Now, 1 Thessalonians 4 is the same, this section we're in is the same subject, dealt with the same way. It's just much more brief as 1 Corinthians 15. So it's dealing with the same thing. So that was their hope, the hope of resurrection, which Paul preached. He said several times throughout Romans, and we won't spend a lot of time going to there, that he was in chains and he was in bonds for preaching the hope of Israel, which was resurrection. Anyway, verse 14, if we believe that Jesus died and rose from the dead, now in 1 Corinthians 15, remember, eknekron, plural. Okay, it's plural. How do you have plural dead? Or does that mean they're deads? Well, yeah, technically, multiple people have died. This is the people who are in Hades, who have been in Hades since day one. Now, this is according to Romans chapter 14? No, not Romans 14. Let me show you this. Romans 5:14. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam till Moses. Is this physical death? So this is what we have to ask. Because I had someone tell me today, well, you'll never be able to get spiritual death out of Genesis 2 and 3. Really? Well, let's see how Paul felt about Genesis 2 and 3. Death reigned from Adam until Moses. Okay, if this is physical death, then that means death no longer reigned after Moses or at the time of Moses. Doesn't work. The death that's being spoken of here is very similar to what we read in Hosea chapter 13 and verse 14, where it's referring to death and Hades. Okay, it's the same language that we see the Revelator adopting in Revelation, death and Hades, Revelation chapter 20. So, so that's what's going on here. So if we believe that Jesus died and rose from the dead, he came out of Hades, he defeated the grave, not the physical grave, not the tomb. Okay, so let me explain what he means. When we say he defeated the grave, okay? Where was Jesus when he was dead? Let's ask that question. Where was Jesus when he was dead? And some of you might want to automatically jump to a conclusion and say, well, he was in the tomb. Really, was he? Peter didn't believe that. Peter said that he was in Hades. And if you think that's wrong, 1 Peter chapter 3, I am going to show you this here from 1 Thessalonians, by the way. But Peter said this is very simple. I'll get over here. 1 Peter chapter 3. And this is verse 19, I think. Well, 18 and 19. For Christ also died for the sins once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. So when Jesus died, what was dead and what was alive? The body was dead. It was decaying. It started the process. As soon as you die, as soon as your heart stops beating, your brain stops functioning, your lungs stop respiring, you begin the decomposition process. Now, in 4 days, Lazarus was smelling pretty ripe. Jesus obviously didn't do that to the same extent. He was in the grave for 3 days. But Peter understood that he was in the grave. His flesh was dead, but he was in the grave. Listen to this. He was dead in the flesh, but alive in the spirit. Verse 19, in which he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison. Now we can do a study of the Old Testament, and we can see that prison is sometimes used to refer to Hades. Who once were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah, during the construction of the ark, that which is 8 persons were brought safely through the water. Corresponding to that, baptism now saves you, not the removal of the dirt from the flesh, but an appeal to God for a good conscience. By the way, here's a reference to that Old Testament type and the New Testament antitype of baptism. We'll have to go through that one of these days. But I want to make this point. Death reigned from Adam till Moses. It was the Hadean realm. When Adam fell, when he sinned, there was no place for his soul to go, because the Edenic relationship was not canceled, but they were separated. Isaiah 59 verses 1 and 2 teaches that our sins separate us from God. So mankind sinned, Adam sinned, Eve sinned. Now they were separated from God, not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. They were kicked out of the garden. Were they still in God's presence? Doesn't the Bible teach us that the rain falls on the just and the unjust? So is God with us while we're here on this planet physically? Of course. But spiritually, if you're dead, you cannot be in the presence of God. So what that poses a pretty big problem for you when you die under the old covenant system from Adam to Moses, okay? It's a pretty big problem. Where's your soul going to go? Because if you had been faithful, you couldn't go to heaven to be with God because no atonement had been made to open heaven. If you were unfaithful, what happens to your soul? Well, judgment hasn't come, so it has to wait for judgment to come. Now, when you died under that covenant, old covenant, that's what happened to your soul. And that's where Jesus went when he died. He didn't go to a big hollowed out place in a rock, in the side of a mountain with a rock in front of it. He went to Hades. That's exactly what he told the thief on the cross. Now, let's look at this again. So in verse 14, if we believe that Jesus died and rose from the dead, so also God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep through Jesus or in Jesus. He's talking about this judgment day. So who are those who fell asleep in Christ? Well, they died physically, but they belonged to him. They were, whether you want to call them the old covenant worthies, whatever, they had done acceptably what God had required of them. And they were in reserve in Hades. So here's what happens. Jude says, as well as Enoch, which I find very fascinating, that he would come with 10,000s of his saints. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24 that that's what he would do, right? I may not get to any of my... I was going to show you some slides for my presentation, but hey, if I get to them, great. If not, I will try. I will try because there's some information I want to share. I'm leading up to all that, actually. I just don't know if I have enough time. But notice what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24. So you're going to tell me that this language isn't talking about the second coming of Christ. Just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. What is this? The coming of the Son of Man when the lightning's flashing to the east, from the east to the west? Wherever the corpse is, the vultures will gather. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Love it when my futurist brethren refuse to answer this. It's that deer caught in the headlight look. What does this mean? Is this the second coming of Christ? Or is this Christ coming at the destruction of Jerusalem? If it's figurative language, and you're going to claim it's just figurative language, then you got a huge problem if you're the futurist. If you're going to claim that it's literal language, then you got a really big problem. You got a really big problem either way. The only way to see this in its proper perspective is how they were talking about it in their lifetime, verse 35, verse 34. Anyway, so then he says, the sign of the Son of Man will appear. It should actually be in heaven. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. He will send forth his angels with a great trumpet. They will gather together all his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. So here in Matthew 24, Jesus says, at this time, the elect are going to be gathered. That is resurrection. Resurrection is when, get this, the souls buried in Hades came out of Hades. It's the same resurrection that Jesus underwent when he was in Hades and he escaped it, never to return again. He escaped. He broke the bonds of the death grip, so to speak, of Hades and defeated the grave. So here it says, if we believe that Jesus died and rose from the dead, so also God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep through Jesus. We just explained that. Now notice here in verse 15, for this we say by the word of the Lord, that we, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord. What did they think? I actually heard Norm say that Lori said, I think he read a comment from her. I might be wrong, but it might be somebody else. I don't know. But anyway, a woman named Lori, or somebody named Lori, actually said that that they weren't they were not expecting Jesus to come back in their lifetime. Let me read this again. All right? For we say this to you. This was not written to me or anybody else alive today. By the word of the Lord. What word did Jesus speak? Matthew chapter 24 that we just read. That we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep. They were expecting the resurrection to take place in their lifetime. We who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord. Now we came over here to illustrate that there is no rapture in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. But look at verse 16. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Okay, this is, guess what? The resurrection, right? Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Now, let me point something out here to y'all. Okay, he said he has set the tone through inspiration. He has told them that they would be alive at the coming of the Lord. This isn't the first time that that point is being made to the brethren in the first century. Then he says, those of us who are standing here, as Jesus said in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, those of us who are standing here are still alive, who remain, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord. Well, it sure sounds like a rapture to me. Okay, this is the only place that the word air is used, A-Y-R in the Greek. No, I'm sorry, not the only place. It's one of two places, I think. But either way, I want to show you what he's talking about. So if you look here in Ephesians, the 2nd chapter. So in Ephesians chapter 2, it says, are you ready for this? Verse 1, now you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you all formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Maybe I should have brought this up, but so I don't lose my train of thought here. Let me just explain this. So from Ephesians chapter 2, maybe this will help to not be so distracted. So in Ephesians chapter 2, you have, and then I'll look at the comments and then I get distracted. You have the same word being used, air. Now notice what the air is. The air is this realm. And when you look at the definition of the Greek word air, then it's 5 feet off the ground where we live and breathe. That's the definition of, that's what it means. So when we do this and we're looking into that and we do a little bit of research, here's what we see. These guys were living in the realm of the adversary, Satan, Ha-Satan from the Old Testament. And they're living in that realm. And that's the air. That's the realm. That's the place. But when Jesus comes back, guess what? It becomes his realm or his air. And that's where we meet him. Now, if you follow the feasts, okay? So the last 3 feasts, everything follows the feasts. Everything follows the feasts. So if we leave the feasts out, then our interpretation is going to be way off. So you have Jesus coming, in the last 3 feasts. You have the Feast of Trumpets. Okay, it's the last trumpet sounds. The reason it was the last trumpet is because before that, a month before that, they would blow a trumpet for 30 days before the Feast of Trumpets. And I don't remember what that was called. It's one that they added. But anyway, so they would blow a trumpet like every hour for 30 days or something like that. And then finally, when the Feast of Trumpets began, it was the final trumpet blast. And what that does is it heralds the coming of the atonement. So you had the Feast of Trumpets, right? Then you had the Feast of Atonement that would take place. This is all 3 weeks, all crammed in together. And then you had the Feast of Booths, or tabernacles, which really is not accurate. Not a great way to say this. But anyway, they would build tents. Okay, the Feast of Tents, if you want to call it that. And they would build tents all around Jerusalem. And then when the high priest comes out of the temple, which is symbolically heaven, and Jesus is our high priest. So do you get the picture here? So you've got the high priest coming out of heaven, and he pronounces that the atonement has been accepted and forgiveness has been granted for a year, essentially, until the next year. And then they would party it up. Get this. The high priest comes down to dwell with them where they're at. That's the symbology of the return of the Lord. Now, if that hasn't happened, and the Lord hasn't returned, then we do not dwell with him. That means the church is not complete. Heaven has not been opened. For any of you out there, I'm just gonna say this. Any of y'all out there that want to say that you go to heaven when you die, you are a preterist. That is preterist teaching from the 1st century. Okay, so let me go back to this. No rapture. It's the air. He comes down to meet us in the air. Now, let's move on just a little bit from here. So, no rapture taking place. So, Ed Stevens and his, I don't have anything against Ed. Ed's a smart guy. But I disagree with his teaching on the rapture. So they want to say, well, this rapture took place. That's why there was this silent period and there was no writings because everybody was gone. All the Christians were gone. So they obviously didn't write about anything. Listen to this. In 70, there was no more inspiration. Once the temple fell, that was the sign that Zechariah 12, 13, and 14 had been fulfilled. Chapter 13 makes it very clear that, well, let me just read this. So go to Zechariah chapter 12 and 13 and 14. Maybe I should let me bring this up here. That way I can just show you. Okay, I got to type it in. No, it's just the way this works. Yes, that's what I meant. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to. I'm just going to take a minute. I'm going to show you these things real quick. Okay, this is Zechariah 12. Now notice even the editors put a little subtitle in there, Jerusalem to be attacked. So there's no question that this is Jerusalem, right? It's going to be attacked. Well, when is that? That is in the 1st century. Okay, Zechariah, just watch, I'll show you. Okay, he says, the Lord who stretches out the heavens, lays the foundation of the earth, and forms the spirit of a person within him, declares, behold, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes staggering to all the peoples around. And, whoa, no, don't edit it. And when the siege is against Jerusalem, it will also be against Judah. So you've got this siege taking place against Jerusalem and Judah. Then he says it will come about on that day, right? He says, I'll make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all peoples. Now, when you go through this and you look at all of the things that are being taught here, guys, I hate to do this to you. I have to end this. I am so sorry. I'll try to resume this, but I have to end this right now. So I'll get back to you just as soon as I possibly can. Okay? Thank you all.